radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening. How you doing? How you doing? It's Tuesday, March 17th, 2026. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. Let's do this, man. Yeah, this week on Fade to Black. Last night, Nick Sconia was with us, Self-Awareness, an absolutely incredible show. Tonight, it's Gabiann Marin. It's Gabiann. I know all week I've been saying it wrong. But it's Gabiann. She's with us today. We're going to be talking about St. Patrick's Day, Ireland, and the paranormal side of things. And then tomorrow night, it is the Monroe Institute with Luigi. You ready? Sgambarella is with us tomorrow night. And I know that I've also butchered his last name. It's this long. You know, it's just one of those things. And it's Italian. And just like Gabriel, he's going to come in here and correct me. So, but that's tomorrow night. Thursday night, we are off air. I will be in Sedona for the Ascension Retreat this weekend. It's going to be a lot of fun. And that is my next event. And it is this weekend in Sedona. It's going to be beautiful out there. I'm really looking forward to it. It's this weekend, March 20th through the 22nd. And if you want to head out there, you want tickets, you want to do whatever you want to do, go to SedonaAscensionRetreats.com. The links for that are below. All right, so let's get things started. I'm wearing a green shirt. It happens to be a Harley Davidson shirt. Wearing green, that is the order of the day for everybody when it gets to St. Patrick's Day. It starts in school, right? Kindergarten, everybody's got to wear green. And if you don't wear green, you learn that lesson very early on. You don't want to go through that. And it goes all the way through to the end of life. Right? You've got to do it. You have to do it. So this morning I was thinking, oh, that's easy. Okay, so green. So I go into my closet, and I'm not proud of this. I have a walk-in closet with a lot of shirts. Okay, and it's embarrassing. It's just something that I will never post pictures of it. And how is it? So I go and I look, I don't have any green shirts, like none, not even a dress shirt. I looked through, I was like, this isn't, and then I found this. I was like, oh, I do. I have, I cannot, I've got every color. I don't have any, nothing. I lucked out with this. I almost didn't find this in that crazy closet of mine. But it's St. Patrick's Day, everybody. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight. And I'm really looking forward to the show. We do this every year. Every year we do a St. Patty's show. And one of the things that I had mentioned yesterday on the air was that when I was on KFI AM here in LA, I listened to KFI all day long, all right, because I was one of the hosts on KFI, and it's the biggest AM station here in Los Angeles. It's a ginormous talk radio station, KFI. So anyway, but on St. Patty's Day, in the morning on KFI, they would have reporters at bars in Los Angeles. So what's going on at 3rd Street in Santa Monica? Whoa, we're at the blah, 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 our Irish pub. Okay, let's go to North Hollywood. Where are you? We're at Ireland's 32. And that was, and I thought, people are drinking, like sport drinking, like for real, Olympic drinking in the morning before work. And then they get off work and continue this. And we love St. Patrick's Day here in the United States. And Chicago, huge Irish community in Chicago. St. Patrick's Day in Chicago, it's a thing. It's a thing. So it is St. Patty's Day. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. But what is this holiday? Why do we celebrate it? We're going to get into all of that tonight. Gabiann Marin is with us live, by the way, from Australia. She's an author. She's a researcher. And we are going to explore all of it, that island, that country off the coast over there in the United Kingdom. So we're going to do that and see where we land at the end of this. Her links are below. I would like to welcome for the first time to Fade to Black. She's right there, Gabiann Marin. Before we get started, Gabiann, you get the first time guest disclaimer. So let's get that out of the way so we can do the show. Okay, you ready?
Okay.
Yeah, she's nervous. She was like, "What was it?" Okay, Gabiann. It's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends. Where the conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends, but we're going to end as friends. See, that was easy. You stressed out, but you have to accept.
I accept.
You accept. Okay. It was even easier. We celebrate this holiday here. We take it very, very serious. But I would say the majority, I can't speak for the world, but the majority of Americans treat it as a drinking holiday. They don't know the history of St. Patrick's Day. Can we start there? What's going on?
Yeah.
Why do we celebrate this day?
So it's interesting. So as you mentioned, I'm from Australia. Pardon me. I'm from Australia, and we don't celebrate it to the same extent. Although we have a lot of Irish history and we come from the Irish settlement of Australia through convicts, it's not a big thing here. But when I was living overseas in England and Ireland, it was massive. And my interest is because I study mythology. And one of the things that's really interesting about this, in fact, all Saints' Days, but particularly this Saints' Day, is how connected to mythology it is. So there is a historical element and then there's a sort of mythological element. And because Ireland is Ireland and it's so full of myth and legend, this day becomes connected to both of those things in really beautiful ways. But let's start with the history.
Sure.
So the history is St. Patrick was a real person. We have historical records of him. And he was, there should be a Hollywood blockbuster movie of this man's life. Like, it's actually quite interesting. So the first real record that we have of him, he was a Roman and he was abducted by Irish pirates when he was 16 and taken to Ireland, and he lived there for quite a few years as a sort of a prisoner. And then he was released and he went back to Rome. And then he decided to come back as an adult. He came back to Ireland to convert the Irish to Catholicism. So what's really interesting about that is that he had a real knowledge of Ireland and he had a knowledge of the people and how and the mythology of it. So he was really well placed to convert these people. So that's sort of the historical element of it. The myth element of it is the whole getting rid of the snakes thing. There are some great conspiracy theories, that he killed a whole lot of pygmies who lived in Ireland and now don't live there anymore, and they were the leprechauns. None of that is true. But there are those sort of stories that come up. It's kind of this very interesting way of trying to explain a lot of the myth around him. as a character. He's a really interesting character.
Right. Where did the snake thing come from?
Yes, so the snake thing. So the first thing to say is that as far as we know, Ireland has never really been a habitat for snakes. In fact, the British Isles aren't really. I think they have one snake in the whole thing that's endemic to it. But the snake is a pagan symbol. So the snake is seen now, most scholars kind of agree that the snake is a symbol for the pagan religion, and that he was driving the pagan religion out of the country and converting them to Catholicism. And so it's a metaphor, it's an allegory of that process. What's really kind of interesting is how snakes overall are perceived. So prior to Catholicism and the sort of Christian Abrahamic religions, snakes were really generally quite positive. They were seen as rebirth. They were seen as fertility. They were seen as strength and power. In Africa, there's a really beautiful belief that snakes are the messengers between earth and heavens. So, they've got this really important place. And then over time, that's shifted and it's become quite negative. And that's just the demonizing of the pagan kind of, and pagan's just a general term, as you would know. It's all sorts of things. Anything that's not Catholic or Christian.
Yeah, anything but Catholic is pagan.
Yeah,
right.
That's it. So it's an allegorical story that lifts a lot of weight. It says a lot about. I think it's also, however, kind of untrue, because in relation to the British Isles, I think generally when we sort of think of that area, we think of the UK, Ireland particularly has a very, very strong mythological pagan undertone to it to this day. I mean, we can sort of see it with the leprechauns and everything that I'm sure we're going to get to.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that St. Patrick would have been at all successful if he had tried to get rid of that. I think where his success came was that he actually kind of embraced it, and he brought these things in so that they could kind of understand Catholicism through the lens of the Irish mythology. And that was really, I think that's why it's managed to survive, because and become like a national holiday that people don't even think of as being a religious festival at all, because there's so much more around the Irish culture and the Irish the Irish attitude to life, which I don't think was St. Patrick's attitude to life. I don't think he went out drinking and, and carrying on and having, running around with leprechauns around him and stuff. But the Irish people do, and that's fantastic. That's fabulous.
You know what's really interesting when we talk about pop culture today, that Ireland so today, you know what Ireland is known for? Two things: Bono and Enya.
In the music world, that'd be true.
Yeah. Well, just people think, and that's pretty cool, because before that, the ideas around Ireland bordered on, just I don't want to say negative, but this image of Irish people being rebels, the leprechaun, and this other part of it, drinking, potatoes, these things, where that's not Ireland. That's not what it's about. But that was built up in popular culture. And I think that has gone away because of Enya and Bono. Put a little distance in there. Put a little distance in there. But Ireland was able to, and I want your comment on this, because Ireland was separate from the rest of the UK. It was its own thing. It was its own culture. Well, what do you do with stuff like that? You build up myth. You build up mystery. And Ireland had all of it, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think its geographical location is really great. for that. It does feel like you're crossing this kind of threshold when you go to Ireland that feels mythic. I mean, I think Scotland has this too. The Scottish, their culture is very different, but it has that kind of mythical element. But their myth is much more around kind of, the Scottish Highland and that really fantastic kind of warrior sort of idea. I heard this fantastic quote. I can't remember who said it, but they were saying that essentially the Irish are warriors who dance. And I think that's a really great way of thinking about it.
That's actually good.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? It just says so much about them, and that it's about fun, it's about celebration, it's about that having a crack, being optimistic even in the face. And I think you're right. There's been some really negative, connotations around Ireland for a really long time, particularly Northern Ireland, which I think is starting to change now because that conflict is pretty much over. So we no longer have the need for the propaganda wars, I suppose. But yeah, there's something very interesting about the myths of Ireland, which do come. I mean, again, it's all about building up over time. So a lot of the Celtic, particularly the Irish stuff that we know of now, has root in Norse mythology and Germanic mythology, which really inform it. But it's also completely its own thing, because it's taken ideas like the rainbow. So we know how the rainbow is quite connected to the pot of gold and the leprechaun idea. Well, the rainbow is borrowed directly out of the idea of the rainbow bridges in Asgard, and that's how you get to the heavens in the Nordic idea. So they've taken that and they've gone, yeah, we like that, but we're going to actually make it about a pot of gold. So it's still a bridge. It's still a way to get somewhere and somewhere good, but it's much more practical. And that's what I kind of love about the Irish. They're so practical about it. Like, yeah, heaven's fine, but hang on, here's a pot of gold. Let's look at that.
Is Patrick an official saint?
Yes.
He's a saint.
He is.
Yes, and he's and said,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So
how did that, what did he do to become a saint?
So, well, see, it depends on the timing of when people become saints and what the requirements are, because sometimes they're very strict and other times they just go, yeah, we're just going to let them in, right? Now they're becoming really strict about it. But essentially what you have to do is you have to perform a miracle that has to be observed by at least 2 witnesses. The reason I know this is because I actually wrote a book about Australia's only saint. We have a saint called Mary MacKillop, and she was beatified and then put in through as a saint in 2012. So she's quite new. And that process, they actually sainted her after she died, which is usually the case. But her miracles happened after she died as well.
What kind of dog do you have?
It's the next door neighbor's dog.
Oh, it's not yours?
No, it is the next door neighbors have decided to get a dog and then leave it. So it's going mental today, and I don't know. Yeah, it's awful, dog. That's part of the reason why I put the headphones on. I hoped it would stop that being quite so annoying, but yeah, no, it's the next door neighbor's dog.
It's fine. It's fine. I love it. Okay, so back
I live in the land of werewolves.
What's that?
I live in a land of werewolves. They're everywhere. These dogs are crazy here.
Oh, I thought you were being serious.
No. No.
I don't.
No.
It's Australia, man. Everything goes
it's
down.
Australia.
And okay. I don't want to get sideways here.
Mm-hmm.
Wolf Creek.
Oh yeah.
Right? Okay. In the 90s, I see the movie, and then I get the documentary, and I collected the DVDs, and I watched it over and over again, because I watched the movie and I just thought it was just a horror movie. Then I found out it was real. That
sort of real, based on a real person, yeah.
Oh yeah. So I got the documentaries, and I was like, holy crap, man! Right, tourists too, of all things, and the meteor, the crater, and how the whole thing. So when you say, you know, when you say stuff like that, I just think Australia's got everything, man. Why not? Why not?
Yeah,
Werewolves, sure.
yeah.
Wolf Creek. Okay, so back to this. What did he do?
So his main thing was converting the conversion, right? So that was what you used to get deified for, was converting a group of people over to Catholicism. Nowadays, there just aren't anyone left to convert, right? So they can't. They've shifted the focus of it. So his ability to do that. Also, I think he was also a really good messenger of the church. He was well liked. He also kept really great records. So, and this is part of the reason why we know so much about him, because he wrote quite a lot. He wrote a lot of letters and stuff. So he kept the church involved, and he was involved with the church from the very beginning. So he was a bishop, whereas a number of saints either weren't connected to the church at all, or actually were not people. Were not actually real people, or weren't specifically a person you could pin down. So St. Bridget is one that we would talk about as being, and she's connected to St. Patrick, right? So St. Bridget is a version of the Irish goddess Bridget, who was a goddess of writing. And she was very, very important in Irish mythology. So this is what I was saying before, that Patrick was very good at going, okay, how can we do this? So he brought her in and said, all right, well, you should, and it was very casual. Like, it took a long time for her to sort of come in and become part of that pantheon, but he sort of said, yeah, absolutely, you can still believe in the people you believe in, we'll just classify them differently. So they stopped being gods and goddesses, and Bridget became a saint. The others became fairies, and that's where fairies come from. They were the original gods and goddesses of the Celtic religion.
Explain. Stop right there. Stop right there. That's where fairies came from. That was the beginning of the fairies.
That's right. So there's a long kind of history of fairies, but essentially the first version of them, which is called the Tuatha Dé Danann, which I've pronounced terribly, were a race of gods and goddesses who came across the waters to Ireland in the days before time, right? So this is the kind of genesis of it, if you like. There is belief that this is why we have the Nordic element, that they could have had something to do with Vikings or something to do with settlers or people coming over from Germany. It's not sure, because it's, again, all put in myth. But these people, so there's this story of these incredibly powerful people, and then they started to get deified. And so Bridget is one, Macha is one. So she's the goddess of horses. So things that were important to Irish culture and life, like agriculture, harvest, horses, water. So very nature-based. So these different people, my favorite is a goddess called Cerwyn, and she had the cauldron of life, and from this cauldron she would create everything. And that's why witches have cauldrons. It's connected to her, and that idea of, creating potions and stuff. So all these things sort of come together. As that got pushed away into kind of a Catholic kind of understanding, the fairies diminished. So, and they became nature spirits. And there's this sort of idea that they retreated back into the mist. They retreated back to their isles, these sort of hidden isles that you can't go to. And that's where we get this idea of fairyland, right? So that's that idea. But but then we got things. So the modern idea of the Tinkerbell fairy is very new. Originally, fairies were quite big; they were human-sized, and there's this really kind of interesting link between the way St. Patrick and over time the fairies were kind of connected to this idea of angels, and that's how he sort of explained the sort of the transformation of them, and that's why they stayed, because the Catholic idea of angels and the idea
you got to keep the people happy, right? You
and
have to. That's why the Catholic Church resolved so many things with the pagans, combining religious dates and things and working things into one, because it's better than fighting each other, right?
absolutely.
And they did that. But today, are fairies part of all of that, right? This whole nature thing. And Carowin, that's a really good example. How does that mingle with the Catholic Church in Ireland, which is so strong?
I think it lives
culture goes
side
this
by
goes.
side.
We're going.
So I think there was this interesting poll done. I think it was in 2021, for the Republic of Ireland. So it didn't include Northern Ireland. So I'm not sure if that's true there as well. But certainly within the Republic of Ireland, there was a poll about how many people believe in fairies, how many people believe in leprechauns, how many people believe in nature spirits, like believe in them, not just think, aren't they cool or whatever it is. And over 60% said they did. So there's this, and it sits alongside. So it's a folklore that is incredibly strong, and I think it's part of the resilience of the Irish people, that they do have that connection to nature. They do have that connection to understanding that there are cycles to things, and there's a reason why things happen, and that you are not removed from the natural world, that you really need to think about it when you're making decisions. And again, a very agricultural culture. The Irish famine was incredibly important to a lot of this, because what was happening in the Irish famine was not that the Irish weren't making food. They were making a huge amount of food. They were the kind of the food bowl of the British Isles, but it was all being taken out, and they were left with the potatoes. So that's the whole potato thing, right? So they were left with those. And then when the fungus got through the potatoes, that's why the Irish people were starving. But the land itself is incredible. Like it is incredibly abundant and giving. So there's this really interesting thing about how we relate to nature based around the environment we're in. And people who live in much more harsh climates tend to have a far more antagonistic version of nature as a deity. And people who live in really kind of abundant, fertile places tend to have a really positive one, which completely makes sense, right?
Yes.
And so that's why in the Middle East and kind of Babylonian, Mesopotamian kind of version, nature is antagonistic. Nature is something you fight and you control and you dominate. But in the Celtic version, this is something you engage with every day. You have conversations with, you talk with, you trade favors. It's a very different relationship. And I think, and I love that relationship. I think that's a really beautiful thing to do, to understand your environment.
And be nice to the gods. Be nice to the fairy gods.
Yeah. So there's a thing with fairies that you never take unless you give. So things like when you're harvesting, you will leave stones. You will leave a stone to show that you're, repaying something. Before that, it was coins. People would leave coins. They'd plant coins in their fields to thank the fairies. And those sorts of things, I think they work. I think the reason
Oh,
they work is
yeah,
because
100%.
yeah,
100%. I say, you know what I tell everybody? I say it every day on the show because I love it. I ride a Harley. I listen to heavy metal music. I see what's behind me, right?
yeah,
That's my life. I'm a hardcore dude, but fairies are real.
yeah,
Nobody will
yeah.
ever. I had, and that Tinkerbell reference was interesting, and I do want to circle back to that if we can.
Mhm.
Um, I'm up in the mountains with a couple hundred friends, and I'm sitting by the campfire. It's in the middle of the day, but we got a campfire. I'm sitting there, and this lady comes up to me and says these words: "Hey, Jimmy, I just took a picture of a fairy. Do you want to see it?" And I'm like, bullshit. No, I don't want to see it. Right? I'm serious too. I was just like, no.
Yeah.
She takes out her phone and shows me this picture of frigging Tinkerbell in a globe just floating. And I'm looking, and it's like Tinkerbell, right, with the wings. And what? Where did she goes? I just took it right over there by that tree. When? Right now. You took this picture, and it was I'm telling you, this wasn't like imagination. So you know what I did for the next 3 days? I stood by that stupid tree with my cell phone,
Waiting
trying
for
to take my picture. I couldn't
Yeah,
believe
yeah.
it. Gabiann, I couldn't. It was
Yeah. So there is a long history of fairies appearing to people and why they do and this sort of idea of messengers and that you should pay attention to that because they don't like to be seen, right? So that's a key thing because you know they're not part of our world anymore. They've been sort of pushed out of it. So if you and a lot of people say, kids say all the time they see fairies and stuff, and we go, "Oh, that's nice," you know, da 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 da.
That's cute.
But what? Sorry, it's
I
cute.
said that's
Yeah,
cute. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But what we're now starting to think when we sort of look at that from a folkloric study, but also from kind of a psychological study, is that is being able to see a different kind of dimension of space. So the best way to kind of explain this is, you know, crows and ravens, right? So we see them as black. They're not black. They're an incredible array of colors. We just can't see the colors, but other birds can. So what we see is very, very limited. And sometimes some people are actually able to expand what they see a bit. And we don't have an explanation for why or how that happens, but we know it does. The same way we know that some people can't see certain colors, right? So it's perfectly reasonable. It is not a bizarre woohoo idea to think that people might see a fairy, because what is a fairy? Perhaps it's just a way that we're making sense of and understanding a nature spirit, something that is an energy that's working through that makes nature work, because something does, right? And lots of different cogs and lots of different wheels. So we don't know. But I find it fascinating that throughout all cultures, throughout all time, we have had versions of fairies. We have versions of nature spirits. We have versions of these creatures, humanistic, animalistic, parts of a rock that might get up and move, whatever it might be, that directly speak to us to say, pay attention to the world you're living in. Pay attention to what it's giving you. Pay attention to what you're taking. And think about that. And I think now more than ever, with all of the things we're talking about with climate and environment, we should be paying attention to those things.
Now, I've been told many times, you've heard the same thing, that if something disappears, your keys, whatever it is, right? Just ask the fairies nicely to return it, and it will show back up. Now, again, cute. It's cute. It's fun. No, that is real stuff. I just don't think that, because I've had my own experience with it, I won't get into that. But I've also have had many friends of mine go through the same thing. I'm missing my wall. I'm missing this. I'm missing that. It was here. It was here. Okay, just ask the fairies for it. And later on that night in dinner, so I came in there. There they were. They weren't there before. I looked there a million times. I asked for the keys to come or whatever it is, right? I asked for my other sock or whatever it is, and it gets returned. Where does this stuff start? And do you think that there's something to that?
So this goes back again to the idea of paganism and what paganism really is. So paganism, as a general idea, is a belief that there are energies around that do things. And if you can connect to those energies, so religions have taken those energies and kind of deified them and removed them from people to a large extent, which is fine because that is a way to do it. And people connect to that through prayer or through ritual or whatever it is through their religious thing. But what pagans do is they relate directly to the energy. So they will go and they will talk to a tree. They will go and they will spend time and meditate near a river or whatever, because they understand the intention. Thought is an energy. So when you're thinking about things, when you're meditating on them, when you're focusing on them, you're sending energy out, and energy is reciprocal. So if you're doing that with the intention of finding something, if you're doing that with the intention of becoming more focused, of getting some kind of message, getting some sort of insight, like I do it with creativity all the time. I can't come up with an idea for a story. I've got to get something done. It's got to be written. I will sit and I will ask for that, and I will put that out, and then an idea will come to me. It's the same thing. It's this reciprocal energy idea. The problem is that we're so busy and so distracted and so focused on so many different things all the time and multi-skilling that it's very hard to get into that point. But when we've lost something that's meaningful to us, like a wedding ring or keys that we have to get, then we're going to focus on that, right? And the energy of that's going to be really strong. So it's this concept of what we do, our imagination, our thoughts, our feelings, they have resonance, and that resonance does something. It affects, you feel it. What you feel, someone has a bad vibe, right? You feel it. Someone says, I don't know why I'm always having bad luck, and they're just one of these people that just carries this weight around with them because they're drawing it to them. So the pagan idea is it's all about energy exchange. What you put out is what you get. And the finding lost stuff, fairies again as a manifestation of energy. So you bring that in, the fairy will definitely. I had a very interesting and very kind of full-on example of this many years ago. I was living in Sydney, where I live outside of Sydney now, but it's one of our bigger cities, and I was living there. And I was living in an apartment building, and there was nothing. It was industrial. There was concrete and roads and these big apartment buildings. There was no nature anywhere. We didn't even have lawns or anything. And one day I saw this ring of mushrooms around our clothesline, and it had just grown through the cracks of concrete into a perfect circle. And I thought, that's so strange. Like, why has that happened? So I was thinking about it for a while. Then the next day I saw this cat. Again, never seen this cat before. It was quite small. It was a very odd looking cat. It looked like a cat that had not properly grown, but it wasn't a kitten. And it was sitting in there. And I thought, that's really interesting. Okay, I'm going to pay attention to that. And then the next day, that cat was sitting at my front door. And I went to pat it and it ran away. And I thought, okay, it's just a stray. I'm not going to worry about it that much. I went back and the fairy ring was gone. I thought, oh, someone's picked it, whatever. I wasn't worried. The next day, my apartment was broken into and I was totally robbed. And it was the guy who lived in the flat, who'd done it, who lived in the flat that was directly looking at the fairy ring. And that cat was trying to warn me, don't go into your house. Don't go into your house. There's something scary here. I never saw that cat again. I never saw a fairy ring again. That was it. And I, to this day, think it was warning me. to just be careful and to pay attention, because I sort of did. I was kind of quite like, what's going on? So I think
Isn't
there are
it?
definitely.
You know what's funny to me? There are a lot of people that don't pay attention to this stuff or care about it. You can talk to them and they just no. And how boring is life, right? Where you just want to just cut off thinking like a child and wondering about what is out there. And people don't pay attention to this stuff. I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, I do too, because it pays you to pay attention. You get a lot more out of the world if you're paying attention to what's going on.
So if it wasn't for, I want to go back to your point. I want to know if I'm understanding you. Because of St. Patrick, we have fairy tales.
Sort of.
Right?
We have Celtic fairy tales. So we have the certain ones that come from the Celtic background. There's a lot of fairy tales. So fairy tales are kind of, there's two different sort of styles of them. So there's ones that they're actually about fairies, and they're your leprechaun stories, your kind of your stories about banshees, your stories about kelpies. So these are your mythical creature kind of stories, and a lot of those have Celtic background. If you're talking about more of your human kind of stories, your Cinderellas, your Snow Whites, they're more Germanic, but there's a crossover, right? Because they also incorporate elements of magic in them, which is what makes a fairy tale, is that element of magic. But we do have St. Patrick to thank for a lot of the Celtic, for knowing a lot of the Celtic mythology, because he wrote it down. So before that, it was pretty much an oral tradition, and he was interested in it. So in his letters, in his notes, he would write down the different legends of different places. So there's a really beautiful Irish myth of the Selkie, which is around the coasts of Ireland, and it's got to do with seals. So the idea is that a Selkie is a woman, a female fairy who takes the form of a seal. And every so often at night, she will come up onto the land, sometimes a group of them, but often on her own, and she will shed her Selkie skin. So she will shed her seal skin, and she will dance and she will do stuff. And if you capture her skin, if you can take her seal skin, then she is you claim her as a wife. And so there's this whole mythology along a lot of the coasts of Ireland that they're descended from human Selkie descendants.
Wow.
Which is, and that's why they're really good in the sea, and that's why the fishing, they have really good fishing because they have that connection directly. And they actually believe that that's their ancestors. Which is a really, again, they're not making the differentiation of that is something that is over there. It is absolutely, this is something that is part of our history and part of our coastal town and part of our personal, biology, which is really interesting.
That's
so
fascinating.
That's
The other part is that I almost said the original, but when you go back to the origin stories of this, that fairies were the size of humans. And if you go, if you look at the Tolkien side of this, right, the Lord of the Rings side of this, fairies and elves were just like us.
Yes.
Right. All right. And so, I don't want to get too far into the Lord of the Rings. It's a fascinating subject, and I love it way too much. But so we have that picture of it, which is in contrast to the Disney Tinkerbell version of fairies. And before Disney came along, fairies were already part of pop culture.
As small.
Small. So where did that, or are they the same? Where did that
So-
start? Where did the small version?
Yeah, so that's the sort of diminishing idea, and that sense of making them so that they could be somewhere where we couldn't see them. So over time and iteration, it made more sense when you were writing about fairies, when you were talking about them and trying to explain, well, why aren't we just, running into them? There's that whole transformation thing. So they can transform into animals, they can transform into trees and plants and landforms. So that's part of it, but there's also the part that they become small. They hide in rosebuds. And that's the nature thing, right? So connecting them directly to the element that they live in. So when we talk about fairies, we're talking about a lot of different things. We're talking about nature fairies, we're talking about animalistic fairies, we're talking about earth, water, fire, air.
Are there bad fairies?
Yeah, so this is the thing. Fairies are neither good nor bad. They're like us. They can be absolutely awful. And if you cross them, they can be incredibly vindictive and incredibly violent. There are certain groups which are more likely to be violent. But if you get them on the good side, they can be incredibly protective. And they're the ones that you want,
You remember in the movie Labyrinth, right?
Mm.
With David Bowie. So at the beginning of the movie, when Sarah, Jennifer Connelly, meets Hogwarts for the first time outside of the wall, a fairy comes up and flies around her. And it's a great scene because she goes, "Oh, it's a fairy, look." And then bop, she gets bit.
Yes.
And she goes, "It bit me." And Hogwarts goes, "It's a fairy. What did you expect?"
Exactly.
And,
you don't
direct
treat them, they're not
contrast,
pets.
right?
Yeah. And I think over time, because of fairy tales being moved into children's literature, so this is a massive thing. So fairy tales were never originally specifically for children. I mean, they could be because they were warning stories, or they were stories about, where to go to find the whatever you need, or educational stories, or stories about, how we should value the land and we should consider how we're engaging with things. But they moved into children's stuff around the 19th century. So before that, they were really folk tales. They're for everybody. And there was violence. There was really immoral elements of them. And I think you'd have to describe fairies as a general term as being amoral. So they're not specifically good or evil. They're doing their thing. And from their perspective, they're justified. That's how you kind of look at it. So if you do something that upsets them in some way, then they will come after you. If you don't respect them, they will either not help you or they'll actively work against you. There's really interesting things, though, which, again, human psychology gets put onto fairies as well, because they are manifestations to a large extent of how we're perceiving things. So one of the things I love about some of the Celtic Irish fairy myths, and this also is in some of the Germanic ones, is they don't want you to thank them, right? They're not interested in that. In fact, if you thank them, they'll get quite annoyed because it's their job, right? It's what they're supposed to be doing. So if you're thanking them, you're not kind of understanding their role and their importance, and you're diminishing them in some way. And so this is a really kind of interesting thing, and it's sort of part of the reason why they do things, and explains why they do things that when you don't see it, because they don't want to draw attention to it. They don't want to get that gratitude or that thanks. But that doesn't mean you can't be reciprocal. But it means the reciprocal element has to also be something that isn't just about thanking them, but is actually for the greater good, right? And the greater good of the environment, the community, whatever it is that you perceive that to be. So, and I think that psychologically, that's something we've lost. We've become very transactional in the way we relate to people. We've become very transactional in the way we relate to nature. And I think if we think more about greater good and our duty of care and the fact that we're all supposed to be custodians and carers and nurturers. But that doesn't mean we can't extract. We have to extract because we have to live off the land. We have to live off the environment. But those two things are not separate. And I think we separate them a lot.
Yeah, we do. We do. Are fairies loners? I mean, do they have lives?
No,
are there fairy villages out there in the woods?
Yeah. So some do, some don't. So they're very different. So again, fairies is a sort of a clutch-all term, but there's lots of different things you can talk about. But let's talk about the St. Patrick's one. Leprechauns are a very specific kind of version of a fairy, right? These were not around, as far as we know, interestingly enough, during St. Patrick's time. So these are a reasonably new fairy. So, but they've become part of Celtic legend and they're still kind of a big part of it. As far as we know, there has never been a female leprechaun, ever.
Oh.
So,
that's a good point.
Yeah. So they do not come as females at all. And so when we're going back to where do leprechauns come from?
I never thought about that.
Yeah. So
that's a lonely life. That's why leprechauns are pissed off.
Yeah. So I mentioned before there was this kind of conspiracy theory about this sort of genocidal St. Patrick who went around and killed all these little people who lived in Ireland. Again, there is absolutely no evidence of this. But people were trying to kind of understand what the leprechauns were and why because leprechaun actually means little people. That's what it actually means. And people is important to this because although we've put them into the fairy realm, they probably weren't. It's probably a way to kind of talk about a particular aspect of Irish culture that was not being respected. And they are the artisans and particularly cobblers, tailors, people who work to create garments and shoes. They're workers. Right.
Leprechauns were always fashion forward.
They were always fashion
forward. Right.
Absolutely.
The clothes, the hat.
They always look
buckles,
beautiful.
The boots. Yes.
Exactly. And that's the key to them. So the current sort of thinking around where leprechauns come from is that they're around that kind of group of artisans, makers who during particularly the Industrial Revolution were really in trouble because manufacturing changed and all those sorts of things happened. And so these people started disappearing, if you like, from the villages as a profession. And of course, this was mainly a male profession. This was something that was done mostly by older men. It was a hand skill. It was an artisan skill. So the point was leprechauns worked for their money. And this whole idea of the leprechaun's treasure and finding leprechauns' treasure was actually about it was a bad thing to do, right? To take a leprechaun's money was a terrible thing to do, and you would get a curse for that originally.
That's right.
Now we sort of think about, they're lucky. I'm gonna get money and stuff, but actually, the original idea and a lot of the original stories are these people who are tricking the leprechauns to try and get this money, and the leprechauns taking some really nasty revenge on them. Because you shouldn't steal from the working class, right? You shouldn't steal from the people who are working to make a living and are working hard. So that's kind of where the leprechaun comes from. But then before that, and what it's probably based on, is a nature spirit that was more like a gnome. So a gnome is and they do have wives and children and little villages, and they're gorgeous little things. And they are essentially directly connected to looking after the soil and the earth. So if you have gnomes, people put gnomes in their garden, right, to make it flourish. That's where that comes from. So these were, again, agricultural deities. They were seen as being, if you had a gnome, you would give offerings to your gnomes, milk, bread, things like that, to keep them happy, to let them feed their children, and that sort of stuff. They would live in these little underground villages, and so that idea kind of turned and got melded into this idea of the leprechaun as well, in a very Irish way.
Now, what about before we hit the break? Iceland. Now, we're talking about Ireland, but you mentioned polls, right? So there was a poll like 2 years ago, very famous poll. It's like 99% of the people of Iceland believe in elves.
Yep.
Right. That's it. End of story. In the backyard of the homes in Iceland, you have to have an elven house, right?
Yeah.
And they're like a birdhouse size thing, and you right, the offerings, you keep them, you keep them fed. It's like a thing.
Yeah.
And it's not any different than different cultures, and certainly Ireland, the way that they look at this stuff, is it?
That's right. So elves are very similar insofar as they're little deities that help you. So you've got house elves, you've got workshop elves, you've got nature elves, woodland elves, job. And this is what I was saying before about this idea of them having a job, which I love. I love the fact that they really know what they're there for, and they're doing it, and they love it. It's who they are. It's their identity, if you like.
Could you imagine going to Iceland as a tourist, like me, right? Somebody like me going into a bar going, elves. Dude, you get run out of the country.
You would. I've been to Iceland, and I can tell you definitely would get. They have little elven villages on the side of the road.
They do.
Stop and look at.
Yes.
And if you've been to Ireland, it makes sense, because Iceland is this place that is just. It's like living in a different world. Like it's otherworldly. There's maybe 10 trees on the entire island. There's these massive volcanoes, this incredible rock, like black rock, and these geysers that spit up, and this, like, it's just bizarre, but beautiful. And you go in, and you can walk for, I don't know, 4 hours and never see another person. Like, that's possible.
I love that. I love that.
I love it too. And they also have this thing where they just leave things. So there will be these kind of a building, and instead of demolishing it, they just go, that's okay. It can just go back to the earth. It can just so there's these beautiful kind of just, and so it looks like, these places where strange, interesting things can happen. And I think they do. I think it's an amazing, and the history of Iceland. I mean, I don't know if you're aware that it was the place that had one of the worst witch trials.
Oh, yeah.
In the world.
Yes.
And weirdly, also unusually, most of the witches in Ireland were men. In Iceland were men who were actually put to trial, not women.
Yeah, makes sense.
Which makes it very unusual.
Yeah, it's unusual, but makes sense. And that's the other thing. We're going to take a break right here. Iceland was named Iceland to keep people from living there because it was such a beautiful place. They named Greenland so everybody would live there and leave Iceland alone.
It's that's right.
That's pretty strange, isn't it? And when we come back after the break, I want to get back to leprechauns. This is my thought. Okay, we've got 60 seconds. This is my twisted brain. Okay. I think leprechauns were aliens.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Little green men. And that, right. That everybody ran into, they saw, okay, all right. And then it turns into mythology. It turns into folklore. It turns into a folktale. But I think the origin story, they saw something. They did.
That's very interesting, because that is what mythology is. Mythology is a way for us to explain things we don't understand.
They were
So
Martians. Yeah.
yeah,
Leprechauns.
and we wouldn't understand that, right? If you saw something that just was so alien, you had to work out what it was.
How do you explain that to your kids? Right? Okay.
Exactly.
So you can't. And you don't even know that they're aliens. You just know that you saw some green dudes running around in the woods. So you're going to turn that into something else that everybody can understand, including if you're the leader of the village, if you're the mayor of the village or whatever, you're not going to, especially if you don't understand it, you can't go, okay, well, this craft came down and these little green dudes came. No, you can't explain it like that.
No,
You
you
got to
can't.
take it somewhere else where everybody can understand it and turn it into something that people can accept without freaking out. But that's my take. As my little thing, I think that they saw something, and that same thing with fairies, same thing with angels. If we go back into deep history, and from the heavens coming down, and the yeah, they saw something. But you have to explain it as gods. You have to explain it as angels.
You do. Yeah. You've got to put it into a context that you understand. I mean, think about how we used to explain the sun. It was a person riding across the sky in a chariot because that made sense. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. When you get back into like Egyptian mythology and the origin stories there, and Ra, and how the sun appeared and went through the sky every day, there was somebody up there pulling it.
Yeah,
Right?
that made sense to them, which you completely see the logic.
It makes sense to me now, let alone back then. Right?
I think they get very sunburnt.
Gabiann, stay right there. We're going to take
right.
a quick break. Fantastic show. Happy St. Patty's Day, everybody. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Gabiann, stay right there. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. I am hosting, speaking, and presenting once again for the Conscious Life Expo, the largest conference of its type in the world. February 20th through the 23rd, 2026 at the LAX Hilton. Speakers, event, and schedule easy. Just visit consciouslifeexpo.com. I will be hosting and speaking at the Sedona Ascension Retreat, March 20th through the 22nd, 2026 in Sedona, Arizona. An amazing list of speakers, and it's beautiful Sedona. Come and hang out with us and just go to SedonaAscensionRetreats.com. I'm heading back to the Midwest for the Contact Modalities Expo, May 1st through the 3rd, 2026, in Delavan, Wisconsin, at the Lake Resort. It is beautiful. This is a great conference right in the heart of the Midwest, where I'm from. I'll see you there. Just go to Contact Modalities Expo, that's XPO.com. I will be hosting and presenting once again at Contact in the Desert. That's May 28th through June 1st, 2026, the largest UFO conference in the world. Come and hang out with us June 23rd through July 1st. Tickets and everything else that you need is at contactinthedesert.com. Want to change your life? Want that paradigm shift? Then visit Peru with Brian Forrester and myself for the Inca Celebration of the Sun, June 23rd through July 1st, 2026. full 10 days of visiting the country, all of the amazing sights, and of course, the celebration of the winter solstice. It's all simple to do. Go to hiddenincatours.com. Come join us for the Monty Python Scotland Tour, August 1st through the 9th, 2026. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event where you get to go to the castles from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. August 1st through the 9th, 2026. Just visit HaleyARamsey.com. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut.
Jimmy Church Guy TV here at Machu Picchu with Brian Forster and Hidden Inca Tours. Amazing tour so far, Brian, but we're here to announce what we're going to do next year in 2026. What's going on?
Okay, November 2026, we're going to have our major tour of Peru and Bolivia, either a pre or post tour of Paracas and Nazca on the coast. And then after that, 6 days in Easter Island.
Bucket list, Easter Island. Come join Brian and I and his amazing team here at Hidden Inca Tours for Peru, Bolivia, and Easter Island. Signing out. Say goodbye, Brian.
Bye, gang.
River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Gabiann Marin is with us live from Australia. It is St. Patrick's Day today. Happy St. Patty's Day, everybody. And that's what we're talking about tonight. There's so much mythology and folklore and things that are tied to this and the paranormal and the supernatural that are right around St. Patrick and those origin stories. And that's what we're doing tonight. And now back to, okay, so when with leprechauns, it's completely tied to St. Patrick's Day, right? Yeah. Okay, so we have that. We have the Fighting Irish, Notre Dame University, out here, and what's their symbol? It's a leprechaun. And we have that. Then we have Lucky Charms cereal, right? With that version, nice, cute little leprechaun chasing rainbows and the pots of gold. And we have that. Then we have Hollywood coming in with their leprechaun movie series where he's a serial killer, right?
And I think famously, wasn't that Jennifer Aniston's first film was Leprechaun?
Oh, is that right?
I think that's right. She definitely did one. I think it was Leprechaun. That was her very first film role. Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay. So which one is right? And where did these? What's the origin? Is it Celtic? Does it start there?
Yeah. So St. Patrick was around 5 BE, right? So they call it, Common Era now, CE. Leprechauns we didn't really start hearing about them until about 8 CE. So they're quite a bit after St. Patrick was around. But when the idea of St. Patrick's Day was starting to become a bit stronger, and that sort of idea of Irish nationalism and that sort of stuff was starting to come, which is also kind of interesting because I think the leprechaun, like I was saying with fairies before, they're fully developed little personalities. They can be really nice, but they can be awful. And if you cross them, so particularly if you steal their money, and they're mischievous, so they like to play tricks on people. They like to prank. They've got that Irish sense of humor as well, which can be a little bit mean, but just fun and physical humor. So there's a lot of stories about, people being spanked on the bottom by leprechauns and turning around and they're not there, and then they're spanked again, and then they have things drop on them and things like that. So they definitely could, for a bit of fun, harass and annoy people. But essentially, they're not, like with anything else, they're not evil. So that sort of horror idea. There's actually a one that came out, I think, last year called The Watchers, which was also a sort of a horror film based on kind of Celtic fairy lore. And it was really interesting because I think it really captured that idea that they're curious and they're interested in us and they want to know what we're doing, and they're happy to help us, but they're also not that happy with us when we're not respecting them. And so they can turn on a dime. And if you're in the wrong place or you're not acting in the correct way, then yes, you could definitely feel the sharp edge of a leprechaun's sort of ire. There's actually a place in Ireland called Carlingford. I don't know if you're aware of this place, but it's a little village, it's tiny. But it has got World Heritage status for the protection of leprechauns. So, and this is only Ireland could do this, okay? But it's fantastic. So, and I think it was 2025 the last time they did the poll. They have counted there are 36 leprechauns. So it's an endangered species now, right? So no one has necessarily, seen them, but they know there's 236 of them. I think it was 236. So
do they have names?
No, they haven't named them as far as I'm aware. Okay. There might be a couple that sort of people have nicknames for or whatever it might be. But everything in that town, it's essentially just focused around the leprechaun idea. And it is the friendly face of the leprechaun, absolutely. It is the Lucky Charms leprechaun here. There's nothing evil or scary or vicious about this one. But what I loved about that was what they're doing. So they're using the leprechaun, and as I said, people do believe in leprechauns. We've seen polls. You talk to Irish people.
Sure, I believe
there is a belief in them.
Yeah.
But what I loved about that is that they're using the leprechaun mythology to actually preserve nature. So turning that into a national park, into a heritage park, protects it. It conserves it. And the leprechaun is a great way of doing that, right? It's because it's connecting to the idea of the fairy as a custodian of the land. And it's made it fun, and it hasn't been all preachy about, we need to do this. It's just done it in such a clever way, building on what fairies are, which are those custodians of the land, and are about engaging with us and wanting to be kind of part of our community in some way, even if we don't always understand how they're doing that. So
when I was a kid, I was very young, 7 years old or something, right in there. And my brother Mike, who was a year younger than me, we were outside and there was a rainbow. All right. This is in Chicago. And he goes, "Come on, man. Let's go find the pot of gold." Nah, you go. And off he walked. I have no idea, but he walks to the pot of gold. Now, obviously, didn't. Later, I went on an adventure with him, another rainbow, to go find this pot of gold. The first time he obviously was unsuccessful, and we walked forever and never got close to the rainbow until the rainbow disappeared. Now, that idea of the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, where did that start? Where did the pot of gold become? Because as kids, this is just right, and we went on an adventure to go find this. Many people have. Where did this start?
Yeah, so a few years ago, I wrote a book called Monsters and Creatures, which was all about the origins of different stories. And so I looked at were there any real things, were there things that you could trace back? And it's surprising that there almost always is, right? There's always something that has led to this. And we were talking before the break about how mythologies are really about trying to explain something we don't quite understand, but we've experienced. But actually, I mentioned it before, one of the things that pagans would do is they would give something to the earth to thank it, or to create a bountiful harvest or whatever. And in many cases, that was coins. So you could actually dig up and find coins that looked like they'd been buried. And if you were doing that in the 1800s, the 1900s, you'd think, where did these come from? Where are these coins, right? Oh, leprechauns have buried them there. And that would be the thing. So from that came this idea, oh, okay. And then, of course, the rainbow becomes a way for the leprechaun to find where they've buried their thing. So it's a signal for you to help you find it. So all these things kind of come together. But it also goes back to that idea of stealing from someone, taking from someone, goes against that pagan idea, because those coins, those gifts are not for people. They're reciprocal. So by taking them, by taking them out of the earth, that's a negative thing in a pagan context. So that's where the kind of the negative element, that the leprechaun doesn't want you to do that, doesn't want you to take them. It's saved them for a reason. So all of these things kind of is trying to explain a way of being that was disparaged, was often demonized, that sort of pagan idea, and putting it into a context, into a fairy tale that people kind of understand a bit better. But also removing the pagan element of it, because, that wasn't, the Catholics didn't want you to specifically be pagan and to kind of follow those rituals. So it created this other thing. So whenever I'm always very interested in this. This is what my PhD is on. I'm actually looking at how we construct nature in literature and how we kind of create metaphors for it and our relationships to it, and how mythology is a massive way we do that. And I find it really interesting that every time you come to a nature spirit, there is something that's been built on to explain it. Because we don't quite have the language, or there's some sort of prohibition around it, or there's some sort of negative response it could have if we were honest about it. So it's sort of interesting, going back to what you were saying before about aliens and UFOs and that kind of stuff, and how obviously not in this podcast and not with this audience, but as a general rule, if you went out and said, oh, I believe in aliens, and people would think you're crazy. Right? They wouldn't take you seriously. So you start to have this other sort of language that talks about these sorts of things, and so you can make sense of them in your own mind, and then that becomes the narrative that's more widely accepted. Regardless of how improbable that is, it still is more widely accepted. And I find that fascinating in terms of human psychology, that we just keep doing this, again, across cultures, across languages, across time.
I think it's in our DNA.
Yeah.
I can't. One of the things, and I think that this is a very important point, Gabiann, is that every culture, everyone there are no exceptions. Throughout history, since the dawn of man, have had a god and developed a religion. Cultures that obviously didn't have zero contact with each other, but every single culture developed this. Now, is it in our DNA to do that? Right? Is it just something that we resolve to do? Or is there something else going on where all of these cultures did make contact with something that would have been regarded as supernatural or paranormal, and that it evolved into a religion, but the origins of it are something else that is outside of our reality that they made contact with? That's the part that fascinates me. Everybody did it.
Everybody
right?
did it. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. I think there are many answers, and all of them are part of the answer. I think part of the answer is that we're an incredibly curious, intelligent species that wants to understand things. And not understanding it, not knowing, is anathema to us. We are not good at sitting in uncertainty at all as a species. And that's what's driven us, right? To find things, discover things, understand things, make things, all that stuff. So it's really great. But we can't sit in uncertainty. So if we don't know, we fill in the gap. We absolutely have to fill in that gap. And there is definitely something.
Is it really that simple, though? Or do you think...
Well, I think this is kind of the reason we create the mythologies, right, around it.
What if it's not... My point is, what if it's not mythology? What if it's reality?
So they're always based on reality. That's kind of the point, right? So, but we just don't know what it is yet. So we don't know if it is an alien. We don't know if it is a spirit. We don't know if it is a alternate reality. We don't know. And we might at some point.
What do you think? What do you think? Do you think that there is another reality, something more supernatural than what science wants to explain away?
So I think there's two parts to that. I think there's no way we're the only planet in the entire universes that could sustain life. I just don't think that's possible. Because there are too many, the universe is too big, and it just seems unlikely that only one place had this ability to do that. I can't see how that could be true. I think, however, the chances of us actually engaging with another life is probably really slim because of the distance. So I don't know if there is another life form that has managed to overcome that problem. I don't know. But we certainly haven't, and I can't see that we will. I mean, it's taken us this long to just even slightly explore our own solar system, and we haven't done much of that. So I can't see how we will ever know. Unless, something happens where another race comes here and engages with us directly, I can't see how we will ever know that one way or the other. But I think we would be arrogant to think that we're the only life-sustaining planet that could exist. What concerns me more, though, is that we often are more interested in what's going on in other planets and other life forms than we are on the ones that are here. So we do know more about space than we know about the bottom of the sea.
Yeah, for sure.
And I find that extraordinary. I just find that extraordinary. So, and, we have such an incredible planet with so much here. And I would love for us to spend more focus on that and protecting that, because that's my thing, right? I am very much around, nature is an incredible gift. We are part of that gift, and we owe it to look after it. So,
and the Irish, but that is such a great point. And here we are at St. Patrick's Day, and we're talking about Ireland. Everything that you just said, that is what the Irish are about.
Absolutely. Absolutely what they're about. And And I think it's what a lot of people are about. When you scratch the surface, we get distracted and we get focused. But if you ask people, would you like to live in a place that had no trees, that had no animal, that you had to breathe through apparatus to clean and filter your air, where you had to? The answer would be no. I mean, why would you? But I'm also not. I'm not a dystopia person. I don't think we're going to get to a point where we're going to destroy this planet or the environment we live in. I just don't think we will.
We're trying,
but I think
though.
but we're not doing a good job of looking after it.
Right.
But the thing is, it's more powerful than us, right? And at some point, it will stop supporting us. And we might be creating that or not, but it will happen if we continue to not respect it. If we continue to not, pollute the air, pollute the waters, put too much plastic out, eventually there is no option but for us to be affected by that. And the reciprocal relationship is already unbalanced. We need to balance it up. And I'm not someone who thinks let's all go back onto the land and live in caves or anything like that. I think it's just understanding that respect and understanding that we owe as much as we take. And how do we pay that back? And how do we make sure that the world that we're living in continues to have that reciprocal cycle of energy?
Of course. Mother Nature can do what she wants. There's no way that we have the power or anything else to outrun Mother Nature.
That's right.
Most people don't know. I'm going to give you 2 facts that are crazy. At one point, not that long ago, the entire Earth, everything, all of it was covered in snow.
Yes,
The
that's
entire, all of it. Not little pockets up, no. Covered in snow. Also, it was covered in water.
Yes.
All of it. There was no land, right? And that's nature doing its thing. And to be ignorant, to think that won't happen. Oh yeah, it can, and it probably will. That's Mother Nature doing its thing, and we don't have any control over that. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. That's why we need to respect Mother Nature and just to know that we're just here. We're visitors. This isn't ours.
That's right.
Yeah, we can't control it. Which does take me back to Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is something 100% supernatural. There's something paranormal about Ireland.
I agree. I totally agree. In fact, I think even if you look at Irish history and Irish mythology, there is this idea that the veil, if you like, is much thinner around Ireland. And that's a continuing concept that has played up over time. And
you coexist. The veil is there. Yeah. You just coexist.
Yeah. If something's going to happen, if you're going to have some kind of experience of otherworldly, paranormal, and that kind of coexistence, that kind of understanding that we are part of, not removed from, as being Irish culture, has to be informed by that. I mean, the interactions that they get. I think there's a little bit of that in all natural spaces to some extent. You're closer to those portals, if you like, those energy centers, because nature itself kind of creates them. And I feel that a lot where I live. I live in the Blue Mountains of Australia, and it's a national park here. We're one of the only cities. I think there's only one other city in the world that is actually in a national park. And so we are surrounded by barking dogs and by these absolutely beautiful Australian bush. And I hear people say all the time, "Oh, the sand's poor. It's not good sand. It's not good land here. You can't grow anything." And I think we are surrounded by life. Like there are trees, there's animals, there's everything. It's not great for growing carrots. It's not great for growing lettuce because there's not a lot of water, but it's fantastic for what we would call bush tucker, which is sort of Australian native plants that you can eat. But we don't do that because we're European based now, and so we don't think about food that the land can actually sustain. But when I go out into, and I can step, it takes 2 minutes for me to walk, and I am totally surrounded in bush. There's just no sense of technology, and so you can get there really fast, and that's where you can have transformative situations.
I do the same thing. I live in the desert out here in Los
Oh,
Angeles.
really?
Yeah, I live in the Mojave Desert, and it's a famous place, and it's called the Mojave Desert for a reason. It's a friggin' desert. Okay, that's what it is. And you can go out, and I do it every day, every other day. I'll jump on a bike and take off and ride, and absolutely get to a point where there's the road that I'm on. That's man-made, but there's no structures. You are out. If anything happened, I'm not getting rescued, right? I'm not walking to a house. Nobody's going to drive by me. And there is the people that live in the desert. There is a very special reason why the desert is alive. If you want to, just what you're explaining there, Australia is the same thing. Well, you can't grow carrot. Go out. There is life everywhere.
Absolutely.
And nature has figured out a way to get it done.
Mhm.
And I love that part of it. The desert is alive. It's incredible. I love that experience.
Yeah. So I think that idea of the nature spirit and this, bring it back to St. Patrick actually, which is kind of interesting. So, it's a different day here. We're the day after St. Patrick Day because of the time difference, but you're on the 17th of March, which is the St. Patrick Day. And the reason, so no one knows why St. Patrick's Day is the 17th of March. There's lots of theories about why it's that particular day. Someone said, the most common mentioned is because he died on that day, but we actually don't know. There's no record of when he died.
No, there's no record of his death. Yeah.
No. So it's a guess, right? But if you look at where that sits in the Irish calendar, it's sitting on what they call the vernal equinox or the spring equinox, which is the sort of the mid-spring. So people think about midsummer, they kind of understand midsummer, but mid-spring is a similar kind of idea. So this is the most fertile time, the time when nature is really just giving so much and really engaging. And it's an incredibly sacred time in a pagan kind of Celtic context. So there's a deliberate decision to put it on a day that for a Celtic pagan would have been quite sacred, and to place it at a time when it's all about nature. And then of course you've got all the fairy element, the green element of it, all of that sort of stuff coming to talk about this celebration of spring, specifically in Ireland, but in that sort of region generally. And I think that's not a surprise, because the Catholic Church were very good at doing that. Like they were very good at putting key people's dates on existing pagan festivals. St. Bridget's Day is what we would call Imbolc, which is a kind of a harvest festival. So
we have the same thing out here. I'm going to see if I can pull this up. Just stay with me. Out here in let me see if I can pull this up. I don't know if I can. Let's see if this pulls up as a file. Let's see. Come on. It's okay. Just stay with me. Let me do this right here. here. Because no, really, oh, that's strange. Okay. Out here in the desert, in Palmdale, we have the poppy fields, and let me see. I'm just trying to. I have images on my camera. Okay, I got it. I got it right here. Okay, so this is surrounding my house out here in the desert, and every spring, everything just comes to life. It is absolutely crazy, and to think that when I'm out here riding, okay, so here we go. That's the desert
Wow.
next to my house. Those are poppy fields. Now, these poppy fields, this is when the rest of the year, this only happens for about 2 or 3 weeks, right? Okay. For the rest of the year, that's sand. Okay. That's rolling sand. You can see it in the background, right? You can see it all the way through it just for hundreds of miles. But for these 2 magical weeks, that's what the desert turns into. It's incredible.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's incredible. So you go out there like right now. If you were here, I would take you out 2 miles. Well, it's literally right next to me. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cars. Everybody's out there in the fields taking pictures because it takes up your entire vision as far as you can see. This orange and yellow just rolling forever, and then next week it's like all gone.
Yeah. And it's more beautiful and more meaningful because it's not there forever. You know, that temporary element. Again, it's sort of what we were saying before. The veil moves, something shifts, you see something you don't get to see. And that's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, right. No, so going back to nature, right? So indigenous cultures, going back, let's go back, a couple of thousand years where they don't necessarily, they're in touch with nature, but all they know is one day they wake up and bam, right? It's like, what is going on? That's the gods, right?
Absolutely. Make sense of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the only way you can make sense of it. And now you've written 2 books on gods and goddesses, and very fascinating. I want to dive into that a little bit, but let's go back to Ireland for a second. Let's talk about the witches. Where is it typical witches living alone, right, in a cabin, right, in a cottage with a cauldron, cooking children out in out in the forest? Is this stuff rooted from something somewhere? Because these are frightening tales that were told to us as children.
Yeah. So there's quite a few bits to that. So I mentioned before the cauldron being Cerwyn. So Cerwyn is a crone goddess. So she's an older woman goddess. So there's sort of maiden, mothers, and crones essentially. And crone goddesses are all about wisdom, magic, seeing beyond, understanding mysteries, all that sort of stuff usually. So they work really well to just totally turn them into witches. Right? And that's why we have the hag with the cauldron and the kind of,
the teeth.
Yeah, the teeth, right. And again that sort of class attitude, that because they're rural women who work really hard, right? So they are going to age and they're going to look quite, they're not going to be the most aesthetically pleasing of your female archetypes. So they work really well to shift them over into the witch thing. Witches did exist in terms of a pagan context of that. So these would be, so the word witch is a sort of a vulgarization of the word Wiccan, which is again a vulgarization of a Celtic word for wise woman. And so the idea were these were the women who worked out how nature worked. They worked out how herbs worked. They worked out how childbirth worked and how to help women through childbirth and through pregnancy and through illness and looked and could work out, what was going on with the harvest, where was the better place to plant, things like that. So in a pagan context,
cast spells for crops.
Cast spells is
help,
absolutely the intention thing, right?
Right,
So
right.
you talk to nature, it's the same as saying a prayer in a Catholic idea. It's focusing intention in a kind of a witchcraft way, for want of a better word. So spells don't work unless you have the intention and and it's reciprocal. So that's what the kind of the witch idea came from. And of course, from a Catholic point of view, that's a problem. And from an organized religion point of view, that's a problem.
Big one.
Yeah, big problem. And this is a problem of women. And I mentioned before in Iceland that actually it was men who were more likely to be kind of accused of witchcraft. And what was going on there? And there's this great place. If you ever go to, have you been to Iceland? I wasn't sure.
No, next year I'm going to Iceland. I've
Okay,
already
so
looked
there's
into the flights. I'm going to go by myself, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. But there's a place called the Witchcraft Museum, which actually has the history of witchcraft in Iceland. And they have this extraordinary thing. It's not the real one. It's a replica of it. But the witchcraft that was practiced in Iceland is incredibly morbid. It's really kind of it's very gruesome and visceral. Not
How
like
so? Okay, give me an example.
So they would there were things like sacrificing animals. There were things like pulling out cat's guts and creating things with them and writing in blood. And the reason for that was because there was so much injustice going on in the class system in Iceland. It was an incredibly hard life for the very lowest rung, who were the agricultural workers, because it's got great volcanic soil, but it's not brilliant for agriculture. There's no naturally occurring food that sort of is there. When they got there, they cut all the trees down to build stuff, and then they sort of didn't grow again. So it's a really hard life, and this injustice and this hardship created this sort of incredible bitterness and this sort of anger that was simmering underneath, which you would never notice in current Iceland because they're beautiful people and it's a great place. But that was sort of going on. And so what you would get was you get a lot of cursing and a lot of hexing and a lot of this sort of what we would think of as dark magic, I suppose. And this was mainly done by the males who were trying to get money, who were trying to get power or status or something to shift. So it wasn't so much, which I always found really interesting, because in the history of witchcraft, when you look at most of the people accused of witchcraft, they're helping community, right? They're not getting things for themselves. They're not living in palatial things or anything. They're basically in there. They're making, they're healing people. They're midwives. In some cases, they're creating poisons and things, but generally they're helping community, right? But that wasn't the case in Iceland so much. It was very much more individualistic. And there is this pair of pants. So there is this morbid side of witchcraft, which is all about human bodies and skin and blood and all that sort of stuff and the power of that. And there's a very famous English one, which is the murderer's hand, whereas you cut the hand off a murderer, someone who's been hung for murder. You can use it, you turn it into a candle, you use the skin as tallow and you turn it into a candle, and it gives you all sorts of ability to do all sorts of nefarious things, right? Iceland took it to the max with these pants. So they're literally human skin and they're the human skin of a male, including their genitalia. And if you wore these pants, you would have these powers. And there is a replica of this in this museum, and it is extraordinary. Like you look at it,
you are messing with my head.
I'm not messing with you. I guarantee 100% this is a real thing. As I said, it's not the real skin version of it, although there are photographs of real skin ones, so you can see that they did exist. But they've created one out of latex and stuff. But it's the history of that is extraordinary, right?
Wow.
So it was very different. It was a very different kind of witchcraft that was going on in Iceland than was going on in most of the British Isles and Europe more generally. So that's sort of the woman with the cauldron kind of thing. The eating children thing sort of started up around 1700s when people were starving in Western Europe, particularly Germany. And so cannibalism was happening. It wasn't prevalent, but it was happening. And people were also selling their children because they couldn't afford to keep them because they were starving. So these two things kind of came together, and there were reports, and very famous reports, of people eating other people.
So is this like where Hansel and Gretel came from?
Exactly. So Hansel and Gretel was a fairy tale to kind of say you shouldn't do this. So what happens is this character of this cannibalistic witch appears as a sort of a warning that if you do this, you are evil. If you do this, you are so, and that was its purpose. So it took a pre-existing character who had already been sort of demonized a bit and just went, yeah, a bit with Leprechaun, the horror movie, as opposed to Leprechaun, the Lucky Charms thing, right? Full Leprechaun horror movie on it. But there was a reason, because they were trying to get people to realize that this was just not, yes, you're starving, yes, it's terrible, but this pushes you too far. So again, all these things have basis in fact.
Yeah, well, so okay. The Hansel and Gretel story, as it should, was frightening and caused nightmares in my life. It's all crazy, and I read the book in school. It's there. There's cartoons, a movie or two growing up, and it. Can there be anything more frightening to tell a child than that story? I mean, it's like, it's great, but it's based on something.
It's based on something, but it also wasn't originally for children. So, and you've got to question, there's a lot of people now who go, oh, protect the children, don't give them these terrible things. And that's probably a good rule of thumb generally, because children don't necessarily have the capacity to understand the difference between a metaphorical or a kind of an allegorical story and real life. Also, I don't think I'm wrong here. You say these things and these stories to your children to keep them safe. Yes.
Don't go and get lost in the friggin' woods.
Do not get lost in the woods. Do not walk away. Yeah.
Right.
But I find Hansel and Gretel an odd one for that justification, because it's the parents who send them out. The kids don't get lost, right? They're literally shoved into the woods. So I've always found Hansel and Gretel a very odd story to tell a child. And I've never quite understood it. I also think that if you saw it from the witch's point of view, it would be about two little juvenile delinquents who are destroying her house. So it's a totally different. I mean, if someone came and started eating your house, you probably wouldn't be that happy either. So it's a very odd one. I find Hansel and Gretel a really odd fairy tale. And the Pied Piper is another one I find very odd.
The Troll Under the Bridge. The Troll Under the Bridge, that's one of the scariest things that really frightened me.
But again, I can see why you tell a child that, because bridges historically, particularly back when they were written, were incredibly unstable, and you'd want to be really careful that your kids weren't just running up and down on them and doing like. So I can see that from the point of view of trying to warn your kids about something, and using fear is probably not the best way to do it, but we do. There's another one, a really famous German one, where a guy comes and cuts the thumbs of children who suck their thumbs.
What?
Yeah, and
Now you're just making stuff
this
up
is a
now.
real story, and this was told to children to get them to be too frightened to suck their thumbs, because there was this belief that if they sucked their thumb, they wouldn't develop properly in their mouth. All reasons that they had.
Yeah,
So they
the
invented
story
this
I got growing up, you get buck teeth if you
yeah,
suck your
exactly, that sort of thing. But there was all sorts of reasons why they wanted people to stop doing it, which may or may not be legitimate. I don't know. I'm not I'm not
fairy's
expert
gonna
in that
come.
field.
Fairy's gonna come while you're sleeping and cut it off if you don't stop sucking.
Yeah,
on it.
no, not while you're sleeping. They will literally chase you down and cut it off while you're like the illustrations. I remember this because I did a lot of for the book. And just for my general academic, I do a lot of going in and looking at the origins of stories. And so I'm very interested in where they come from. And this one is a Germanic story. The Germans did have the darker ones, I have to say.
Yeah, the Germans, the Romanians, Russians.
Russian ones, yeah. So the Russian Cinderella, she wasn't she wasn't a pretty little thing that went to a ball.
No,
she was a woman who had a flaming skull torch and she set fire to a village.
It's
very different.
And why this is it's St. Patrick's Day. We're talking about Ireland, of course, but these same types of, call it folklore, stories, mythology, this stretched across, I would say, all the way from Ireland into Central Europe, over into Asia, into Japan, and across back into Central and South America. It's like the same exact stories about these different creatures and species and gods and goddesses and fairies that live around us, and the stories that are told to children. It's fascinating.
Yeah, because no matter where we live, no matter what our cultural background, we're all still the same species. You know, we all have very shared experiences. The land we live on is still part of Earth. It might look slightly geographically different, but we're still engaging with it essentially the same way. We're trying to live off it. We're trying to navigate it. We're navigating relationships. We're navigating societies. We might do these in slightly different ways, but essentially it's the same. So the ways that we make sense of these things, of course, there's going to be correlations. There's going to be crossover. And that's the thing you see with stories, with religions, with all of this stuff. I love the fact that a really common one, we were talking a bit before about South America, and the flying serpent, the feathered serpent of Mexican mythology has a Australian version, if you like, that came up completely separately, which is called the rainbow serpent.
Isn't that crazy? And okay, so the Baba Yaga. What's different? What's different from the Baba Yaga, which is Eastern Europe, right?
Russian.
Slavic, what label you want to put on it, all the way to the frigging Pacific Ocean, by the way, that whole stretch of Russia. But what's different from the Baba Yaga and the witches of Ireland? Not much.
Very little. I'd say one of the big differences would be that if you go back to the pagan stuff before it was kind of demonized, the goddesses in the pagan Celtic religion were incredibly important, and probably more important than the male ones. They were extraordinarily resilient. They had more to do, I suppose. The male stories tend to be more around the human heroes in Celtic mythology, and the god sort of element tends to be more around the goddesses, which I always find really interesting. There were male gods, but they just weren't. They didn't have as many stories. And even with the mythical creatures, we tend to know banshees, we know selkies, we know kelpies who have a feminine aspect to them. The leprechaun stands out here. Sorry?
Garpies.
Yes. So the leprechaun is actually quite unusual in that context because he is very specifically male, and as I said, there's no female version of him.
Yeah. The other part of this, do you think that okay, I just want your opinion on this. When we look into deep history and these stories of gods and goddesses and demigods and origin stories and getting into hermeticism and different things, right? Eventually into paganism and stuff. But when you go into deep history, to me, there was something going on. Do you think that there will be a point in modern human history as we continue to evolve that veil is lifted and holy crap, there is fairies and elves and this thing that is out there that we went from reality and turned it into folklore, but that reality, that veil, do you think that will be revealed to us?
I don't know. I think that's a really interesting question. I think it's possible because evolution happens, right? So we can do more now than we used to be able to do. With technology, with our own physicality, we can perceive more than we ever used to. We can understand more than we ever used to. So I suppose if that continues, then ultimately we will uncover secrets that we don't understand yet. And one of those could be this. From a personal point of view, I kind of hope we don't.
What? I'm the opposite. I want that action.
I like the fact that it's secret and that it's not about us.
Oh, yes. No, I agree with that.
You know what I mean? I love the fact that we can think about it and come to our own conclusions. And I love that. And from a story maker point of view, if people actually worked out what it really was, I'd be out of a job. So that's the problem.
No, it's the same thing with the UFO world, where that's a big part of my community, and I love it. For decades, we fought for recognition of this reality and disclosure. Fought, and all of a sudden, it's like a thing now. Right. Yeah. Where governments are talking about it, the media is talking about it. It's like, and you know what? I know I upset a lot of people. I kind of like the old days when it was our own little secret thing, right? That we fought for and yelled and were angry about. And now it's like, it's mainstream.
Yeah. Sometimes when you get what you ask for, it's not what you want.
Right. Let's leave fairies and leprechauns alone. Let's leave fairies.
Yes, leave them alone. Let them do the thing. But I also think believe in them, because if you believe in them and you care about them, you will care about the world they live in and what they represent. And I think the Irish do that. I think that's where my background. I have Irish background. I have lots of different background, but Irish is part of that. And I really feel that connection to the earth in the way that I think a lot of people do, but we've been pushed away from it. And the more you get closer to that, the more connection you'll have. And yeah, wouldn't it be lovely if there were fairies down the bottom of your garden and they came and they gave you gifts of something, insight, creativity, opportunity. That's a really beautiful thing to believe in, and so much more positive than a lot of the negative stuff we've got around us now.
You are absolutely wonderful. This was just a really, really fun, amazing show, and I've learned so much. And just thank you.
Oh,
and I'm glad that.
So welcome.
Well, we were talking earlier. I was afraid that you were in Ireland, up at 3:00 in the morning, but no. It's lunchtime for you over there in Australia. Where can everybody follow your work?
So I've got a Facebook, Gabiann Marin author, that also links to Instagram because everything does now. So it's the same, Gabiann Marin author. LinkedIn, Gabiann Marin. And I've also got a website, 3 Muses Creative, which is my business because I work helping people write stories and develop their creativity. And of course, it's linked with mythology. Of course it is. And I also have a couple of books out. I'm you can get them through Amazon. So they're published through Australian. The two that we mentioned before, the Gods and Goddesses and Monsters and Creatures, are published in the US through Simon & Schuster. So you can get those. And they go into the origin.
You've written a bunch of children's books.
Yes. So I started by writing children's books. That's exactly right. So a lot of kind of fun fantasy fable stuff and historical fiction are the two things that I'm really interested in. So history and mythology, you can kind of see how those two things keep linking when I talk about stuff. And I've just got a novel out called The Medusa Situation, which is a sequel to the Medusa myth, the Greek Medusa myth. So thinking about what happens to her if she was living in today's world and the same thing happened. So it's a comedy, of course. It's a comedy because I'm all about positivity.
I mean, how fun is that, though, with
So
historical fiction to take stuff and then put a twist on it? And that is the ultimate. I love that so much.
Yeah. So please, check them out. I'm always interested in what people have to say, and please contact me through the socials. I'm always interested in chatting to people, particularly about mythology. I could talk all day, as you've seen.
It's my favorite thing. Gabiann, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Enjoy the rest of your day over there in Australia. But what a wonderful way to celebrate St. Patrick's Day today. It was just perfect. Thank you so much.
Well, enjoy the rest of your day too. Thanks, Jimmy.
Gabiann Marin, thank you so much. Her links are below and also over on our website and throughout social media. I do want to remind everybody as we wind things down tonight, tomorrow night, it's the Monroe Institute. So it's going to be a great show tomorrow night. Thursday night, we're off. I'm heading out to Sedona for the Ascension Conference out there. The links for that are also below. So for now, all I've got is go back. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go back, Lee Tappy.